Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. Michael Anderson hadn't eaten in 36 hours, and that was deliberate. Not a diet, not a cleanse. Something else entirely. A test, maybe, or a punishment he couldn't quite name. He stood at the trailhead off Going to the Sun Road, elevation 6,646 feet according to his Garmin eTrex 30, and felt the emptiness in his stomach like a living thing. The January wind cut through his North Face parka, as if the insulation meant nothing. Glacier National Park in deep winter was a different creature than the summer tourist version. 90% of the park closed. Roads buried under 10 feet of snow. Silence so complete it felt hostile. His radio crackled. Not words, just static shaped like breathing. Michael adjusted the Motorola APX 8000, the same model he'd carried for 8 years. The same model he'd been holding when... He stopped that thought before it could finish. That was the whole point of not eating, wasn't it? To stay sharp, to stay present. When the body hurt, the mind couldn't wander to 3 years ago, to another winter search, to another missing person who'd become something else entirely. The report had come in yesterday. Samantha Clark, 29, solo backpacker, overdue by 4 days from a winter camping permit in the Grinnell Glacier backcountry. Her emergency contact, a brother in Seattle, had tried her satellite phone repeatedly. No response. The permit listed her as experienced, prepared, equipped for winter conditions. But experience meant nothing up here. Michael had recovered bodies of climbers with Everest summits under their belts. The mountains didn't care about your resume. He checked his pack methodically. Avalanche beacon, probe, shovel, first aid kit with thermal blankets, bench-made bushcrafter knife, headlamp with extra batteries, emergency bivvy, 72 hours of supplies. Except food, he'd left that in his truck deliberately. The hunger helped him think, kept him from thinking, both at once. Michael started up the trail. Snow crunched under his Scarpa mountaineering boots with each step. The forest pressed close, lodgepole pine and subalpine fir laden with snow, branches drooping under impossible weight. His breath created small clouds that dissipated instantly in the cold. -15 Fahrenheit according to the weather station that morning. Wind chill made it worse. He'd hiked maybe 2 miles when he found the first marker. Not a trailblaze, not official. Someone had stripped bark from an aspen in a pattern. 4 parallel gouges, each about 8 inches long. Deep. Deliberate. The exposed wood underneath looked almost burned, blackened in a way that suggested something other than tools. Michael photographed it with his Nikon D7000. Standard protocol. He'd document everything, catalog it all, maintain the professional detachment that had served him for nearly a decade as a ranger. The detachment that had only cracked once, 3 years ago, and he'd spent every day since trying to repair that crack. The trail climbed. His legs burned with the effort. Good. The burning meant he was still in his body, still tethered to the physical. His stomach growled, a sound so loud in the winter silence it startled him. Something growled back. Michael stopped. Listened. The wind, probably. Wind through trees could sound like anything. Voices, animals, music if you were exhausted enough. He'd learned that during his first year in the park. Sound did strange things in mountain environments. Echoes behaved unexpectedly. Temperature inversions could carry noises from miles away and make them seem close. He kept walking. At mile 4, he found Samantha Clark's first camp. The tent, a Mountain Hardware Trango 2, stood intact, properly staked, fly secured, no damage, no signs of animal interference. Michael approached carefully, calling out, "Park Service, anyone here?" Nothing. The tent zipper was closed. Michael opened it and looked inside. Sleeping bag laid flat, unrolled, but clearly unused. Camp stove in the corner, fuel canister still attached. Food bag hung from the ridgeline. Proper bear protocol, even in winter. Her pack sat against the far wall, carefully organized. On the sleeping bag, centered perfectly, was a journal. Michael had seen this before. 3 years ago. Different person, different park, same setup. Tent intact, belongings undisturbed, journal left open like an invitation. His hands shook as he picked it up. Not from cold. The first entry was dated January 7, 2015, 6 days ago. First night at Grinnell. Temperature dropped to 10-degree outer. Tent holding well. Ate a full meal. Pasta with dried vegetables, hot chocolate, trail mix. I'm carrying about 4,000 calories per day. Should be more than enough for the exertion level. Something strange though. I'm still hungry. Like ravenously hungry. Even right after eating. Stomach feels empty. Probably just the cold. Your body burns so many more calories maintaining temperature. Michael's own stomach contracted painfully. He hadn't planned to read the journal yet. Should bag it as evidence, catalog it, maintain chain of custody. But his eyes moved to the next entry. January 8, 2015. Woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of scratching. Not on the tent, farther away. Trees maybe. Wind. I got up to check and saw... I don't know what I saw. A shape between the trees, tall, impossibly tall. But when I shined my headlamp directly at it, nothing there. Just shadows and snow. Ate breakfast. 2 energy bars, instant oatmeal, coffee. Still hungry. Ate my lunch rations too. Still hungry. This isn't normal. Michael set the journal down. His training said to document the scene, search the surrounding area, establish a search grid. His instinct, the part of him that had learned hard lessons 3 years ago, said to leave. Now. Get back to the trailhead. Call in a full team. Don't be alone out here. But he'd been alone for 3 years. What difference did it make now? He continued reading. January 9th, 2015. Tried to hike out today. Couldn't find the trail. GPS says I'm walking northeast, but I keep ending up back at camp. 4 times. 4 times. The coordinates are correct. The compass is correct. But the forest... I'm not lost. I know where I am. But I can't leave. The hunger is constant now. I ate everything in my food bag, all 5 days' worth of supplies, in one sitting this morning. I threw up twice, then ate more. I can't stop eating, but I'm starving. Michael's stomach cramped. When had he last eaten? 36 hours ago. A meal he'd barely touched. Before that? He couldn't remember clearly. Days blurred together lately. January 10th, 2015. There are no animals here. I just realized. No birds, no squirrels, no tracks in the snow except mine. How did I not notice that before? And the trees. God, the trees. They've moved. I marked several with my knife yesterday. Specific patterns so I could identify them. But they're in different positions now, closer to my tent, forming a circle. The scratching is constant, day and night, getting closer. I'm so hungry I tried eating snow. It helped for maybe 30 seconds. Then the hunger came back worse. My body feels wrong, too light, like I'm hollow inside. When I look at my hands, they don't look like my hands, fingers too long, skin too pale. That's insane. I know that's insane. This is hypothermia, calorie depletion. My brain is malfunctioning, but I can see my bones through my skin. Michael's own hands were trembling badly now. He forced himself to look at them. Normal, solid, real, but thin. When had he gotten so thin? The next entry was barely legible. January 11th, 2015. It spoke to me. In Blackfeet. I don't speak Blackfeet, but I understood anyway. It said, "You invited me with your hunger." I tried to explain I'm not hungry by choice. I'm eating, I'm trying to eat, but there's nothing left. I consumed everything, and I'm still empty. It laughed. The sound was wrong, like wind through bones. It said, "That's what I am. The hunger that remains after everything is consumed. The need that never fills. You carry me in your stomach. You always have. I've just been waiting for you to make enough space. I saw it clearly tonight. Tall, maybe 8 feet, maybe 10. Antlers like a massive elk, but wrong, branching in patterns that hurt to look at. Skin stretched tight over bone and sinew. Eyes that reflected my headlamp like an animal's, but full of intelligence. Human intelligence. It's been following me since I arrived. No, longer than that. Following me my whole life, waiting for the moment I'd be empty enough to receive it. I understand now. The hunger isn't from not eating, it's from eating too much, from never being satisfied, from consuming and still feeling empty. That's what feeds it. That's what makes it real. Michael closed the journal. His heart was pounding. This was familiar. Too familiar. 3 years ago, another missing hiker named... He couldn't think the name. Couldn't let himself think the name. That hiker's journal had said similar things. Hunger. Emptiness. A presence in the woods. Michael had dismissed it as hypothermic delirium. He'd continued the search. He'd found the hiker eventually. What was left of the hiker. The official report said animal predation. Bear, probably, though bears should have been hibernating. The coroner noted unusual damage patterns. The investigation remained open but inactive. Michael had been the only one who'd read the journal carefully, the only one who'd noticed certain details. The fact that there were no animal tracks around the body. The way the flesh had been removed, not torn but consumed with almost surgical precision. The expression on what remained of the face. Michael had stopped eating for a week after that. Some instinct told him that hunger was important, that feeding the body might feed something else. He'd gained the weight back eventually, forced himself into normal patterns. But lately, the last few months, he'd been eating less, skipping meals, feeling oddly satisfied with the emptiness. And now he was here, in winter, in the mountains, in Wendigo territory. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? The rangers didn't talk about it officially. The Blackfeet elders who still lived near the park didn't talk about it with outsiders. But everyone who worked these mountains long enough heard the stories, learned the signs. Never hike alone in winter. Never let yourself get too hungry. Never consume more than you need. The line between appetite and emptiness was thinner than people thought. Michael stood and exited the tent. The sky had darkened. Not sunset yet, just the quality of winter light in the mountains changing. He needed to make a decision. Continue searching for Samantha Clark, or head back and call in support. The professional choice was clear. Establish base camp, radio for backup, expand the search grid with a full team. But something had changed in him while reading that journal. Some understanding had crystallized. He was here alone for a reason. He'd been preparing for this, unknowingly, for 3 years. The not eating, the isolation, the way he'd let himself become hollow. Michael keyed his radio. Anderson to base. I've located Clark's primary camp. No sign of the subject. I'm going to push farther into the backcountry. We'll maintain regular check-ins. Static. Then a voice, but wrong. Too deep. The words seemed to overlap, multiple syllables where there should be one. Copy. That. Michael. Be careful. Out. There. He released the radio key. Checked the battery. Full power. Signal strength looked good. He was hearing things. Auditory hallucinations from low blood sugar. That was all. Michael left the tent and continued up the trail, or what he thought was the trail. Snow covered most markers. He navigated by terrain features, ridge lines, creek beds, distinctive rock formations. His GPS put him at mile 6. Another 4 miles and he'd reached the Grinnell Glacier cirque. The trees had changed. He noticed it gradually. The spacing between them seemed wrong. Too uniform. They formed patterns. Rough circles. Lines that intersected at angles that created optical illusions. If he looked at them directly, they appeared normal. In his peripheral vision, they looked like figures. Dozens of figures standing still, watching. Michael stopped and forced himself to look directly at one tree. Pine bark. Snow. Normal. He looked away. In the corner of his eye, the tree moved. He spun back. It stood in the same position. "You're exhausted," he said aloud. "Low blood sugar, mild hypothermia, standard cognitive effects." But he knew better. He'd experienced all those things before. This was different. The scratching started, not from one direction, from everywhere. All around him, the sound of something sharp dragging across bark. Dozens of sources all in rhythm. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause. Michael's hand went to his knife. Useless gesture. What was he going to do? Fight trees? He kept walking. The scratching followed. At mile 8 he found the second camp. Or rather, what had been a camp. The tent was shredded, not torn by weather or animals, but systematically destroyed. Fabric lay in strips, each cut precise and deliberate. The contents were scattered but intact. Food wrappers everywhere, dozens of them, all empty. The food bag hung ripped open, completely cleaned out. In the center of the destruction, written in the snow with what looked like a stick, "More." Michael photographed it. His hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. He felt calm, distant. That was bad, he knew. That was his body shutting down non-essential processes. Conservation mode. He needed to eat something. He had supplies. He should, but he didn't want to. The hunger felt right now. Appropriate. Like he was finally honest about something he'd been lying about for years. He found Samantha Clark at mile 9. She sat cross-legged in the snow back against a tree. Alive. Sort of. "Samantha Clark?" Michael's voice came out rough. She turned her head slowly. The movement looked painful, mechanical. Her face was wrong. Skin stretched too tight, cheekbones too prominent, eyes sunken deep, but still alive. Still breathing. "You shouldn't have come," she said. Her voice was a whisper. "I tried to warn them, tried to write it all down, but the words never seemed like enough." Michael approached carefully. "I'm with the Park Service. We're going to get you out of here." She laughed. The sound was hollow. "Get me out? I can't leave. None of us can leave. Once it notices you, once it recognizes you as kin." She stopped, looked at him more carefully. "Oh, you already know. You've known for years. That's why you came alone. I don't know what you're talking about. We need to get you warm, get food in you." "Food," she said, and the word came out wrong. Too many syllables. "Yes, food would be good. Except I ate everything, and I'm still hungry. I ate my supplies. I ate bark. I ate snow. I ate..." She held up her hands. Her fingernails were gone. The tips of her fingers were raw, bloody. "I ate my own flesh," she finished calmly. "Trying to fill the emptiness. It doesn't work. It never works. That's what it wants us to understand. The hunger is the point. The emptiness is what feeds it." Michael felt something shift in his perception. The forest around them suddenly seemed more present, more aware, like it had been waiting for this conversation. "The Wendigo," he said. Samantha nodded. "That's one name. The Blackfeet have others. Fuitico, Achen, the thing that's never satisfied, the spirit of selfishness and greed and consumption. It finds people who carry that emptiness already, who've been trying to fill themselves with things that don't nourish. It just clarifies, makes obvious what was always there." 3 years ago, Michael said slowly. "Another hiker. I thought it was your partner," Samantha said. "Not romantic partner, work partner, another ranger. You searched for them for days, found them finally, but they weren't. They weren't quite right anymore." "Were they?" Michael felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. "How do you?" "It showed me. It shows everyone. All the others who came before. All the ones who carried the same hunger. You've been starving yourself since then, haven't you? Thinking if you could just stay empty enough, controlled enough, you could avoid..." She gestured at herself. This. That's not. I'm not. You haven't eaten in days. You came out here alone. You read my journal and kept going. You knew what you'd find and you came anyway. Her eyes, God, her eyes were too bright, too aware. Because part of you wants this. Part of you has always wanted this. To stop fighting the hunger, to acknowledge it, to finally be honest about how empty you really are. The scratching intensified. All around them now. Trees scraping. But when Michael looked directly at any tree, it was still. Just bark and snow. I have to get you out of here, he said, but his voice was weak. You can't save me. I'm already. Samantha stopped, tilted her head. It's here. Michael turned slowly. The thing stood 30 feet away, exactly as the journal had described. 8 feet tall, maybe more. Antlers that branched in patterns that seemed to fold space around them. Skin like parchment stretched over bones too long and joints that bent wrong. But the worst part was the face. It was human. Mostly. Enough that Michael could see the intelligence there. Enough that he could see it was looking at him with recognition. Michael Anderson, it said. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. I've been patient with you. 3 years is a long time to wait, but you've finally made enough space. I'm fine. I'm in control. Are you? The thing moved closer. Not walking, flowing, like smoke shaped into form. You stopped eating after you found your partner. You told yourself it was grief, but it was guilt, wasn't it? Guilt that you'd eaten that morning, full breakfast, while they were out there starving, transforming. You felt so satisfied while they were. Stop. You wanted them to find what I offered. That's why you took so long searching. That's why you went alone even though protocol said otherwise. You wanted to see what happens when someone finally stops resisting the hunger. When they finally admit how empty they really are. That's not true. But it was. Michael had known immediately that something was wrong 3 years ago. The way his partner's voice had sounded on the last radio check. The strange reports they'd been making. He could have called it in sooner. Could have mobilized a full team. But he'd wanted to see. Needed to see. And when he'd found them sitting in the snow just like Samantha, with that same stretched tight skin and 2 bright eyes, he'd understood. His partner had stopped fighting something, had finally accepted what they'd been carrying their whole life, the emptiness that no amount of food could fill, the hunger that wasn't really about food at all. I tried to help them, Michael whispered. No, the Wendigo said. You wanted to join them, but you weren't ready yet. You needed 3 more years of starving, 3 more years of emptiness, 3 more years of guilt eating at you, the only thing you'd allow yourself to consume. Michael's legs gave out. He sank to his knees in the snow. His stomach hurt so badly. When had it started hurting? Days ago? Weeks? Months? I'm so hungry, he said. The words felt like confession. I know, the Wendigo said softly. That's what I am. The hunger that remains after everything else is gone. The truth you've been avoiding. You can't kill me because I'm not separate from you. I'm what you've been feeding with your emptiness, growing me bigger, making me stronger. Samantha stood. Her movements were jerky, puppet-like. She walked to the Wendigo and stood beside it. It gets easier, she said to Michael. Once you stop fighting, once you accept that the hunger is who you are, not something to resist or control, just truth. The Wendigo extended one too long hand toward Michael. You've been preparing for this moment. You know you have. All the meals you skipped. All the nights you went to bed with your stomach cramping. You were making yourself ready. Making yourself empty enough, Michael finished. He looked at his own hands. They were thin. Too thin. Had they always been this thin? He couldn't remember anymore what normal looked like. Your partner is still here, the Wendigo said. Part of me now, part of everyone who ever gave in to the hunger. We're never truly gone. We're just transformed. Honest finally, about what we always were. Michael closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids he could see them, dozens of shapes in the darkness, all the people who'd disappeared in these mountains over the years, all the ones who'd been found changed, all the ones who'd never been found at all. They were all still here. Part of the hunger, part of the forest, part of the cold. I just wanted to not hurt anymore, he said. I know, the Wendigo said. That's why I'm here. To take the hurt, to transform it into something else, something pure. Michael opened his eyes. The Wendigo stood directly in front of him now. Close enough to touch, he could smell it, death and pine and something metallic. If I give in, what happens to me? You become what you've always been, the Wendigo said. Just more honest about it. Michael looked at Samantha. Did it hurt? Only until I stopped resisting, she said. He thought about his partner, about how they'd looked in those final moments, the peace on their face despite the transformation, like they'd finally stopped fighting something they'd been fighting their whole life. Michael's radio crackled. This time the voice that came through was clear. Human. Anderson, this is base. Do you copy? We've lost your GPS signal. Report your position. He could answer, could trigger the emergency beacon in his pack, could have a helicopter here in an hour. But his hand didn't move toward the radio. Once it happens, Michael asked, is there any going back? Would you want to? The Wendigo asked. Back to the constant ache, the emptiness you could never fill no matter how much you consumed, the guilt and shame and endless hunger. Or would you rather just be honest? Stop pretending you're anything other than appetite pretending to be human. Michael's stomach cramped so badly he gasped. How long could a human go without food? Days? Weeks? He'd pushed it so far already. Why stop now? The Wendigo placed one skeletal hand on Michael's shoulder. The touch was freezing and burning at once. You came here to feed me, it said softly. Not with your body, with your surrender. That's all I ever wanted from you. Acknowledgement. Recognition. Stop pretending I'm something separate, something other. Accept that I'm just the part of you that's honest about the hunger. Michael felt something break inside him. Not his body. Something deeper. The wall he'd built 3 years ago. The pretense that he was fine, that he was in control, that he wasn't slowly starving himself out of guilt and grief, and the terrible understanding that his partner had found something he was still too afraid to touch. Okay, he whispered. Okay. The Wendigo smiled. Its teeth were too white, too sharp, too many. Welcome home, it said. The transformation didn't hurt exactly. It felt more like becoming, like finally admitting something he'd known his whole life, that the person he'd been pretending to be was just a performance, that underneath was just hunger, pure and honest and terrible. His bones lengthened, his skin stretched. The cold stopped bothering him because he was the cold now. His stomach stopped hurting because he didn't have a stomach anymore, just emptiness that went on forever. And he was so satisfied. Not full, never full, but satisfied with the hunger itself. Content to be appetite incarnate, to finally stop lying. Samantha took his hand, or what had been his hand. They stood together, flanking the Wendigo, and Michael understood now. It wasn't a creature, it was a condition, a truth. The forest had always known it, the mountains had always carried it. People came here hungry and left transformed, or they stayed hungry and joined. Same thing, really. What now? Michael asked. His voice was different, layered, multiple tones at once. Now we wait, the Wendigo said. Someone will come looking for you. They always do, and they'll be hungry too, everyone is deep down, just waiting for the right moment to admit it. Michael felt a surge of something that might have been joy, or might have been grief, or might have been both. He was part of the forest now, part of the cold, part of the hunger that had always existed and would always exist. The radio at his feet crackled again. "Anderson? Michael? Please respond." But Michael Anderson was gone. What stood in his place was something older, hungrier, more honest. The three figures, Wendigo and Samantha and what had been Michael, stood in the snow as darkness fell, waiting, patient, knowing that sooner or later, someone else would come. Someone else who'd skipped too many meals, who'd felt too empty for too long, who'd been preparing without knowing it for this exact transformation. The hunger never died. It just found new forms. New people willing to admit what they'd always carried. The scratching continued through the night. Tree against tree, bone against bark, hunger against hunger. And somewhere deeper in the forest, something that had once been Michael's partner smiled. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened. Tell me you didn't touch it. Ryan Campbell looked up from the arrangement of stones to find his supervisor, Chief Ranger Thomas Begay, standing 10 feet back on the West Rim Trail, face carved from concern that went deeper than professional protocol. Ryan had been in Zion National Park for exactly 23 days. Transferred from Acadia National Park in Maine, where the biggest concerns were tide schedules and tourist traffic, and he still didn't understand half the unspoken rules that governed this red rock desert. "I photographed it," Ryan said, gesturing to the cairn-like structure that definitely wasn't geological formation and didn't match any trail marker system he'd studied during orientation. "Wanted to document before calling it in. Is this relevant to the Sutton disappearance?" Thomas didn't move closer. "Step away from it. Now. Don't look back at it. Don't think about it too hard. And for God's sake, don't tell me what shape you think you saw in those rocks." Ryan stood slowly, confused but compliant. He'd learned in 3 weeks that Thomas Begay didn't speak without reason, that the 52-year-old Navajo ranger with 28 years in the park knew things about this landscape that weren't in any training manual. "What am I missing here?" "How long were you standing there?" Thomas asked instead of answering. "Maybe 5 minutes. I was checking the trail for signs of Sutton's passage when I noticed the rocks. They're arranged deliberately. You can see the pattern from multiple angles and the shadows they cast at this sun position form." "Stop." Thomas's voice carried absolute authority. "Don't describe it. Don't try to understand it. Just answer. Did you feel like something was watching you while you looked at those stones?" Ryan started to dismiss the question as superstitious nonsense, then remembered the sensation that had made him look up from his camera 3 separate times during documentation. The prickling awareness of being observed, the peripheral movement that vanished when he turned his head, the way the desert silence had felt less empty and more attentive. "Yes," he admitted, "but there's no cover within 200 yards. I did a visual sweep, nothing." Thomas finally moved, but not toward Ryan. He circled wide, keeping the stone arrangement in his peripheral vision rather than looking at it directly. Morgan Sutton went missing 4 days ago. Last confirmed sighting was at observation point heading down toward the West Rim Trail. "You're telling me you found this exactly where his route would have taken him?" Ryan checked his Garmin GPS map 64est, confirmed coordinates. "Yes, this is consistent with the search grid we're covering. Should I mark it as evidence?" "You should forget you saw it." Thomas pulled out his own radio, switched to a channel Ryan didn't recognize. He spoke in Navajo, rapid sentences that carried the cadence of request or possibly prayer. Then he switched back to English. "We're withdrawing from this sector. New search coordinator is taking over. Someone with appropriate background." "Appropriate background for what?" "Thomas, I've been a ranger for 7 years. If there's a cultural sensitivity issue with this site, brief me so I can handle it properly. But we have a missing person and this is potential evidence." Thomas met his eyes with expression that mixed pity and frustration. "You've been here 3 weeks, Ryan. You came from Maine, where the trees are green and the ocean is cold and the biggest danger is hypothermia. This is different country with different rules, and you don't know them yet. Then teach me. Some things you learn by listening when old men tell you to walk away. This is one of those things. Thomas started back down the trail, then stopped. Did you notice anything else unusual? Animals behaving strange? Tracks that didn't make sense? Ryan thought about the coyote prints he'd found 20 yards from the stone arrangement. Thought about how the prints had been canned for 5 yards, then shifted mid-stride into something else. Larger, heavier, with different gait mechanics. He'd photographed them assuming 2 animals had crossed paths, but reviewing the images showed no overlap point, no place where one set of tracks ended and another began. Just transformation, as though a single creature had changed form while walking. Maybe, Ryan said carefully. I found some tracks that confused me. Might be 2 animals, might be tracking error on my part. Show me. They walked to the site. Thomas knelt, studied the prints without touching them, and Ryan watched his supervisor's jaw tighten with recognition that suggested this wasn't tracking error at all. Ye nald lushi, Thomas said quietly, almost to himself. Then louder. We're done here. Radio dispatch that West Rim Trail is closed pending investigation. Tell them we found evidence requiring specialized consultation. What did you just say? That first part? A word you don't need to know. Thomas stood, dusted red sand from his knees. Listen carefully, Ryan. I'm going to give you advice that will sound insane, but it might save your life. For the next week, maybe 2, don't go into the backcountry alone. Don't respond to voices calling your name unless you can see who's speaking. Don't trust animals that act too tame or make eye contact too deliberately. And if you see the same animal in 2 different places too far apart to travel between sightings, assume it's not an animal. Ryan felt like he'd stepped into conversation happening in a language he'd never learned. You're talking about Sutton's disappearance like it's something other than a lost hiker or medical emergency. I'm talking about things that have been in this desert longer than the Park Service, longer than white settlement, longer than the ancestral Puebloans who carved homes into these cliffs. Thomas pulled out a small leather pouch from his uniform pocket, sprinkled something that looked like cornmeal on the ground in a specific pattern. And I'm talking about the fact that you just spent 5 minutes staring at something built to attract attention from people who don't know better. Are you saying Sutton was what? Attacked by something supernatural? I'm saying Morgan Sutton is probably dead, and the question is whether he died from natural causes or whether something killed him and is now wearing his shape. Thomas finished his cornmeal pattern, spoke more words in Navajo, then headed back toward the trailhead. Come on. We're getting you out of this sector before sunset. Ryan followed, mind spinning through the contradiction of his scientific training and his supervisor's obvious sincerity. He'd grown up in Massachusetts, studied environmental science at UMass Amherst, spent 7 years at Acadia dealing with relatively straightforward ranger duties. Nothing in his background prepared him for conversations about shape-shifting entities and spiritual protocols. But the stone arrangement had been real. The tracks changing mid-stride were real, and the sensation of being watched by something that left no visible trace, that had been real too, visceral in ways his training couldn't dismiss as imagination. They were 50 yards from the trailhead when Ryan heard his name. Ryan Campbell. His own voice. Perfect intonation, exact pitch and cadence, coming from somewhere behind them on the trail they'd just covered. Ryan spun, hand dropping to the bear spray on his hip, searching for whoever had recorded him and was playing back audio. Nothing. Empty trail, red sandstone cliffs, scattered juniper trees. No people, no equipment, no rational explanation for hearing his own voice calling his own name. Thomas grabbed his arm, pulled him forward with surprising strength. Don't answer. Don't look for it. Keep walking. That was my voice, I know. How is that possible? It's not. That's the point. Thomas maintained his grip, forcing steady pace toward the parking area. When something calls your name in your own voice, you ignore it. When something imitates someone you know, you verify visually before responding. These are survival rules for this country, Ryan. You don't have to believe in the reasons to follow the rules. They reached Thomas's truck. A battered Ford Ranger with NPS markings and enough backcountry modifications to suggest serious off-road capability. Thomas unlocked it, gestured Ryan inside, then pulled a laminated card from the glove box. "Read this. Memorize it. I'm not kidding about the survival part." Ryan took the card, found a numbered list printed in both English and what he assumed was Navajo. Protocols for Yi Naldlushi activity. 1. Never respond to voice-only contact without visual confirmation. 2. Never follow animals that maintain eye contact. 3. Never enter structures showing asymmetric architecture. 4. Never investigate lights that move against wind direction. 5. Never sleep in areas where birds refuse to land. 6. Never pursue prey you have not personally wounded. 7. Never speak the full name aloud after dark. 8. Trust dogs. They cannot be fooled by imitation. You carry this in your glove box, Ryan said slowly. You carry official protocols for something that shouldn't exist. I carry protocols that keep people alive in country where unusual things happen. Thomas started the engine. Whether you interpret those things as supernatural entities or undocumented wildlife with unusual behavior patterns is your choice. But the protocols work, and people who ignore them have higher disappearance rates. Ryan read the list again, trying to reconcile it with his worldview. What's asymmetric architecture? Structures that look normal from one angle but wrong from another. Doorways that are different widths on each side. Windows that don't match their interior frames. Signs something built a shelter by watching humans but didn't understand the underlying principles. Things don't build shelters. Animals might modify existing structures, but I've been doing this job for 28 years. Thomas navigated the truck down the winding road toward park headquarters. I found 17 structures in that time that matched the asymmetric profile. Every single one had evidence of human presence: gear, clothing, personal items. None of the 17 people those items belonged to were ever found. So you can argue with me about whether Yi Naldlushi are real, or you can accept that something in this desert builds traps that look like shelters and uses them to catch people. Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to insist that there had to be rational explanations, hoaxes, natural phenomena, coincidence compounded by cultural interpretation. But he'd spent 5 minutes staring at deliberately arranged stones while something watched him with attention that felt predatory rather than curious. And he'd heard his own voice calling his own name from empty trail. Evidence was evidence, even when it contradicted comfortable assumptions. "What happened to Morgan Sutton?" Ryan asked. "Best case? He's dead from fall or exposure, and the Yi Naldlushi is just drawn to the death site like any scavenger. Worst case?" Thomas didn't finish the sentence. "It killed him. Worse, it's wearing him, using his shape to get close to the next victim." Thomas pulled into the headquarters parking lot, killed the engine. "That's why I asked if you touched those stones. Because touching is contact, and contact creates connection, and Yi Naldlushi need connection to properly imitate someone. They study their prey, learn behavior patterns, practice voices and mannerisms. The better they know you, the better they can become you." Ryan felt cold despite the Utah heat still radiating from the dashboard. "You think it was watching me while I photographed those stones? You think it's targeting me now? I think you're new, alone, without local knowledge or support network. I think that makes you ideal prey for something that hunts by isolating victims." Thomas handed him another card, this one with a phone number. "This is Joe Benally. He's a Hatawi, what you'd call a medicine man. He consults with the Park Service on situations like this. You're going to call him, schedule a meeting, and listen to everything he says, even if it sounds crazy. The Park Service officially recognizes medicine men as consultants. The Park Service officially recognizes that certain cultural practitioners have valuable knowledge about behavioral patterns in specific regions." Thomas smiled without humor. "What we call those patterns is a matter of interpretation. Now get out of my truck, go home, and don't come back to work until you've talked to Joe Benally." Ryan climbed out, pocketed both cards, watched Thomas drive away toward the maintenance compound. The sun was dropping toward the western cliffs, painting the red sandstone in shades of blood and copper. Beautiful landscape, the kind that had drawn him to transfer from Acadia in the first place. Except now he looked at the beauty and wondered what watched from the shadows between rocks, what walked the trails after sunset, what imitated human voices perfectly enough to fool people into following them into the desert. He drove to his temporary housing, a small apartment in Springdale that came with the ranger position, and spent the evening reviewing his photographs from the West Rim Trail. The stone arrangement showed clear, deliberate design when viewed from specific angles, something about the proportions and spacing that drew the eye inward toward a central void. Ryan found himself staring at that void for minutes at a time, losing track of thought, feeling that watched sensation intensifying even through photographic documentation. He deleted the images, cleared them from his camera's memory card, tried not to think about what Thomas had said about connection and contact and things that studied their prey. His phone rang at 2:17 a.m. "Hello?" Ryan answered groggily, not checking caller ID. Silence. Then breathing, not threatening, just normal human respiration, steady and calm. "Who is this?" Ryan sat up, suddenly alert. Ryan Campbell. His own voice again, speaking his own name. Perfect replication down to the slight Massachusetts accent he'd never quite lost. Ryan Campbell should come back to the trail. Ryan Campbell should finish what he started. Ryan Campbell should look at the stones again, should understand the pattern, should see what waits in the center of the arrangement. Ryan hung up, hands shaking. He checked his call log. Unknown number. He tried calling back. The number didn't connect. Protocol 1, he remembered. Never respond to voice-only contact without visual confirmation. He'd already failed by answering the phone. Ryan didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat in his kitchen with lights on, reviewing Joe Benally's contact information, trying to convince himself that sophisticated voice synthesis technology could explain what he'd heard. Except his phone was 7 years old, service in the park was notoriously unreliable, and something about the call felt less like recording and more like real-time imitation, as though whatever spoke had learned his voice perfectly and was practicing it, refining it, preparing to use it. At 7 a.m., Ryan called the number Thomas had given him. Benally residence. The voice was elderly, male, speaking English with slight accent. "Mr. Benally? My name is Ryan Campbell. Thomas Begay suggested I contact you about..." Ryan hesitated, unsure how to phrase it. "About some unusual experiences I've had in the park." The new ranger from Maine. Joe Benally's tone suggested he'd been expecting the call. "Thomas mentioned you encountered a marking site yesterday, and I'm guessing you've received contact since then. Voices, phone calls, maybe dreams." "Phone call. Early this morning. Something using my voice." "Good. You called me rather than pretending it didn't happen. That suggests you might survive this." Benally gave an address in nearby Rockville. "Come this afternoon, bring anything you wore or carried when you saw the marking site. We need to break the connection before it strengthens." "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You need to follow instructions from people who've dealt with Yi Nald Lushi for generations. Understanding comes later if you live long enough." Benally paused. "And Ryan, don't go anywhere alone between now and when you visit me. The thing that called you is hunting, and it hunts best when prey isolates itself." Ryan spent the morning at headquarters, deliberately staying around other rangers, researching Navajo folklore about skinwalkers while trying not to look like he was taking it seriously. The legends were consistent across sources. Witches who wore animal skins and gained shape-shifting power, entities that violated sacred taboos to achieve transformation, beings that hunted humans through imitation and deception. Every culture had shapeshifter myths: werewolves in Europe, kitsune in Japan, berserkers in Scandinavia. Ryan had always categorized them as metaphor, ways of explaining psychopathy, rabies, or other phenomena that pre-scientific cultures couldn't properly contextualize. But the stone arrangement hadn't been metaphor. The tracks changing mid-stride hadn't been cultural interpretation. And his own voice calling his own name from empty trail, that transcended any explanation his training provided. He drove to Rockville at 2 p.m., following GPS to a modest house with carefully maintained yard and small Hogan structure visible in the back. Joe Benally met him at the door. 70-something, silver hair in traditional bun, eyes that assessed Ryan with practiced evaluation. "You brought the items?" Benally asked without preamble. Ryan held up a bag containing his uniform shirt, boots, and camera from yesterday. "Everything I wore touched at the site." "Good, come." Benally led him to the Hogan, where preparations had already been made. A fire pit with aromatic wood burning, various items laid out in specific patterns, and a circle of white sand surrounding the central area. Ryan's anthropology minor recognized some elements: corn pollen, turquoise, traditional ceremonial setup, but the overall purpose remained opaque. "Sit." Benally gestured to a spot near the fire. "I'm going to ask questions. Answer truthfully and completely. The Yi-Naldlushi learns through observation, but it can only become what it fully understands. Right now it's learning you, studying your patterns, preparing to wear your shape. We need to disrupt that process." "How?" "By creating inconsistencies, by making you unpredictable, by giving it false information to study." Benally began sprinkling corn pollen in patterns around Ryan. "But first I need to know what it's already learned. Close your eyes. Describe the stone arrangement exactly as you remember it." Ryan closed his eyes, brought up the memory of the cairn-like structure on West Rim Trail, tried to describe the specific placement of stones, the way shadows fell, the pattern that had drawn his attention inward toward the central void. "Stop!" Benally's voice cut through his description. "You're seeing it again right now, aren't you? Seeing it behind your eyelids, clearer than memory should allow." Ryan's eyes snapped open. "Yes. How did you know?" "Because that's how marking sites work. They create persistent images, thoughts that loop and strengthen, drawing your attention back to the point of contact. The Yi-Naldlushi is using the memory to maintain connection, to watch you through your own recollection." Benally added something to the fire that sent up sweetgrass-scented smoke. "We're going to break that connection, but it won't be comfortable. The entity will feel you pulling away and will try to strengthen its hold." "What does that mean practically?" "It means the phone calls will increase. The voice imitations will get better. You'll start seeing things that look like you but slightly wrong. Glimpses in mirrors, reflections in windows, figures at distance that move like you move. It's studying, practicing, preparing to replace you completely." Ryan felt his worldview continuing its systematic demolition. "Replace me? You mean identity theft, or?" "I mean it will kill you and wear your skin, literally or metaphorically, using your form to get close to other victims. That's what Yi-Naldlushi do. They don't just kill, they consume identity, become you so thoroughly that even people who know you might not realize the substitution happened until it's too late." Benally began chanting in Navajo, rhythmic phrases that seemed to resonate with the fire's crackling. Ryan sat in smoke and sound, trying to process the gap between his rational training and his current situation. He was a park ranger with environmental science degree, sitting in a Hogan while a Navajo medicine man conducted ceremony to break a supernatural connection with a shape-shifting entity that wanted to wear his identity. 3 weeks ago, this would have been laughable. Now it was the most sensible action he could imagine. The ceremony lasted 40 minutes. Benally burned Ryan's clothing, buried his boots in the white sand circle, smudged his camera with sage until Ryan's eyes watered from the smoke. Throughout, the old man maintained steady chanting, occasionally switching to English to give instructions. "Think of different memories. Imagine yourself as different person. Create inconsistencies in your behavior patterns." When it finished, Ryan felt lighter somehow, as though pressure he hadn't consciously registered had lifted from his shoulders. "The connection is weakened," Benally said, banking the fire. "Not broken. Breaking requires more time and stronger ceremony. But weakened enough that it can't track you easily now. You've bought yourself time." "Time for what?" "To leave. Transfer out of this park. Go back to Maine or somewhere else far from Navajo territory. The Yi-Naldlushi is tied to this land. Distance weakens it." Ryan thought about Morgan Sutton still missing. Thought about his duty as a ranger, about search and rescue protocols, about the fact that running away meant abandoning someone who might still need help. "I can't leave," he said. "Sutton is still out there. Even if the chances are small, even if most likely he's already dead, I can't just abandon the search." Benali studied him with expression that mixed respect and sadness. "Then you need to understand what you're choosing. The Yi-Nald Lushi doesn't give up prey easily. If you stay, if you continue searching, you're committing to confrontation rather than evasion, and confrontation requires preparation you don't have. Then prepare me. I can teach you protection methods. I can give you items that disrupt its ability to approach closely, but I can't make you Navajo. And this is Navajo magic used against Navajo practitioners who violated sacred laws. You'll always be at disadvantage." Benali pulled a leather pouch from his supplies. "Take this. White ash from burned juniper mixed with specific herbs. If you see something that doesn't feel right, animal acting wrong, person in wrong place, throw this at it. The Yi-Nald Lushi can't maintain form when contaminated with juniper ash." Ryan took the pouch, felt the fine powder inside. "That's it? Just throw ash and hope?" "No. Throw ash, then run, then find help, then perform full cleansing ceremony afterward. The ash buys you time, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Use that time wisely." Benali handed him several more items: a small mirror, a bundle of sage, a stone with hole worn through its center. Mirror shows true form if you're uncertain about someone's identity. Sage disrupts tracking if you burn it in your living space. Stone is for focus. Look through the hole, see only what's real rather than what you're meant to see. Ryan accepted each item, felt increasingly like he was preparing for ritual rather than search and rescue. "Has anyone ever actually killed one of these things?" "Killed? No. Yi-Nald Lushi is already dead in the way you understand death. Human practitioner who transformed completely, abandoned original form. You can't kill what isn't alive, but you can force it to leave an area or trap it in forms it can't escape, or make yourself unpalatable prey so it moves on to easier targets." Benali met his eyes seriously. "That's your realistic goal. Survive until it loses interest. Not defeat it, not destroy it. Just survive." Ryan left the Hogan with pockets full of protective items and head full of survival protocols that shouldn't be necessary in the 21st century. He drove back to Springdale as sunset painted the cliffs in increasingly ominous shades, seeing every shadow as potential threat, every distant figure as possible predator. His phone rang as he parked. Unknown number. Ryan let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message with dread certainty about what he'd hear. "Ryan Campbell." Not his voice this time. Thomas Begay's voice. Perfect replication. But Thomas would never leave this message. "Found something on Angel's Landing. Found Morgan Sutton or what's left of him. Need you to come verify identity. Come alone. Sensitive situation. Don't want to alarm other visitors. Meet me at Scout Lookout at sunset." Ryan deleted the message. Called Thomas's actual number. His supervisor answered on the second ring. "Thomas, did you just call me about finding Sutton on Angel's Landing?" "No. I'm at home in Kanab. Why?" "I got a voicemail using your voice asking me to meet you at Scout Lookout alone. It's not you, right?" Silence on the line. Then, "Ryan, listen carefully. That's advanced imitation. It's studied Thomas Begay well enough to use my voice, which means it's been watching the Park Service staff. Don't go to Angel's Landing. Don't go anywhere alone. Stay in Springdale tonight with doors locked and sage burning." "It's escalating." "Yes. Which means either it's desperate, you disrupted the connection significantly and it's trying to re-establish before you slip away completely, or it's confident enough to move to active hunting phase." Thomas paused. "Joe Benali did the ceremony?" "Yes. He gave me protection items." "Good. Use them. And Ryan, tomorrow we're pulling you off backcountry duty. You'll stay at headquarters, handle visitor center operations, nothing that requires isolation. Until this resolves." Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to insist he could handle himself. But the memory of his own voice calling his own name, the perfect imitation of Thomas requesting isolated meeting, those convinced him that accepting limitations was wisdom rather than cowardice. "Understood," he said. "I'll see you tomorrow." He spent the evening in his apartment with every light on, sage burning in multiple locations, checking mirrors compulsively for any hint that his reflection might be acting independently. The protection items Joe Benally had given him were arranged on the coffee table, and Ryan found himself touching them periodically like talismans against invisible threat. At midnight, his doorbell rang. Ryan froze, checked the peephole, saw nothing, checked again, pressed his eye close to see the full range. Someone stood there. Same height as Ryan, same build, wearing Park Service uniform identical to his own. The figure's back was turned, face not visible, but something about the proportions seemed wrong. Shoulders slightly too wide, neck slightly too long, posture that mimicked human stance without fully achieving it. The figure turned. Ryan jerked back from the peephole, heart hammering. The face had been his face. Exactly his face, down to the small scar on his left eyebrow from a childhood skateboarding accident. But the expression was wrong. Mouth turned up in smile that contained no humor. Eyes reflecting light like animal eyes despite the hallway having no light source to reflect. The doorbell rang again, then his own voice through the door. "Ryan Campbell, let Ryan Campbell inside. Ryan Campbell needs to come home." He didn't answer, grabbed the juniper ash pouch, held it ready, backed away from the door toward the bedroom where his satellite phone could call for help, without relying on compromised cell network. "Ryan Campbell is being rude." The voice outside maintained his exact intonation. Ryan Campbell should open the door. Ryan Campbell should let himself inside. The door handle turned. Locked. But Ryan watched the metal mechanism strain against the bolt, watched the door frame flex slightly as something applied pressure that human hands shouldn't generate. Ryan threw sage on the kitchen stove, ignited the burner, sent smoke billowing through the apartment. The door handle stopped turning. He heard footsteps retreating down the hallway, then nothing. He called Thomas, explained the situation. His supervisor arrived 20 minutes later with 2 other rangers and enough firepower to suggest they were taking this seriously, despite official protocols about supernatural entities not existing. "It was at your door," Thomas said, not quite a question. "Using my face. Perfect imitation except the eyes were wrong. That's second stage manifestation. It's completed observation phase, moved into active replacement attempt. Usually means it's already killed the original prey and is now wearing their form while establishing new identity." Thomas checked every room, examined the door lock, photographed marks on the frame. "But you're here, which means you're still the prey rather than the replaced. That's unusual. Maybe Benally's ceremony worked better than expected. Maybe. Or maybe it can't figure out how to complete the replacement because you're too inconsistent with its observations. The ceremony created enough unpredictability to confuse the process." Thomas gestured to the other rangers. "You're not staying here tonight. We've got a secure room at headquarters. Interior, no windows, multiple doors. You'll sleep there until we figure out next steps." Ryan gathered essentials, followed his colleagues to Park headquarters, accepted the small room that felt more like protective custody than accommodation, but it felt safer than anywhere else, surrounded by people who believed him, who understood the threat, who carried protocols for entities that shouldn't exist. He slept fitfully, waking at every sound, checking the mirror Joe Benally had given him to confirm his reflection moved correctly, matched his actions without delay or distortion. Morning brought news. Hikers had found Morgan Sutton's body on the Hidden Canyon Trail, 2 miles from any of his supposed sighting locations, dead for at least 4 days based on decomposition, from a fall that shattered both legs and rendered him unable to move. He'd died slowly, from exposure and dehydration, calling for help that never came. "Official conclusion is accidental death," Thomas said, briefing Ryan in the headquarters conference room. "Tourist who ventured off trail, fell in a bad spot, couldn't self-rescue. Tragic, but straightforward. Except?" Except there's evidence someone was at the death site recently. Fresh tracks around the body. And Morgan Sutton's gear is missing. Backpack, water bottles, camera. Items that should have been with the body. Ryan understood the implication. It studied him, learned his shape, his patterns, then used his form to, what? Lure other prey? That's one interpretation. Another is that scavengers disturbed the site, and we're seeing normal predator behavior combined with human psychology creating patterns where none exist. Thomas didn't sound convinced by his own alternate explanation. Either way, the official search is complete. Morgan Sutton is found. You're no longer required to work backcountry sectors. But the thing that's been hunting me will hopefully lose interest now that its original prey is discovered. Yi Naldlushi need secrecy, need the uncertainty around missing persons. Once bodies are found and deaths are explained, the entity typically moves on to new hunting grounds. Thomas slid a paper across the table. That's a transfer request, already approved by regional office if you want it. Back to Acadia, effective immediately. Ryan looked at the paper, thought about running from something he barely understood, abandoning Utah for the familiar safety of Maine. Then he thought about Morgan Sutton dying slowly over 4 days, calling for help, while something studied his dying form and learned to wear his identity. Thought about how many other hikers might go missing if this entity remained undisturbed, how many more deaths would be categorized as tragic but straightforward, while the real predator moved freely through the park. I'm staying, Ryan said, at least through the end of the season. I need to learn more about this, about what I'm dealing with, what the protocols really mean, how to recognize the signs before it's too late. Thomas nodded slowly, unsurprised. Then you'll need proper training. Joe Benally has agreed to teach you traditional knowledge, protection methods, recognition techniques. It's not official Park Service training, but consider it cultural education with practical applications. And meanwhile, you stay visible, stay in groups, and remember that the Yi Naldlushi hunts by isolation. It can't take you if you're never alone. Thomas stood, headed for the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, Ryan, you handled this better than most. People from outside Navajo territory usually can't accept what they're experiencing, keep insisting on rational explanations even when the evidence contradicts. You adapted. That's rare. Ryan spent the next 2 weeks splitting time between visitor center operations and sessions with Joe Benally, learning about Yi Naldlushi behavior, about protection protocols that went beyond the items he'd been given. He learned how to recognize asymmetric architecture, how to read tracks that indicated shape-shifting, how to trust instincts that screamed danger even when visual assessment showed nothing wrong. He learned that Navajo tradition held Yi Naldlushi as humans who'd broken ultimate taboos, usually killing family members, to gain supernatural power, that the transformation was irreversible, consuming identity until nothing human remained, that they hunted indefinitely, driven by hunger that wasn't physical but spiritual, feeding on fear and death and the violation of killing those who trusted them. The phone calls stopped after Morgan Sutton's body was found. The sense of being watched faded gradually, as though whatever had targeted Ryan had moved on to easier prey or lost interest once its original hunting ground was compromised. But Ryan never quite shook the awareness that had been instilled during those weeks. He walked the trails differently now, watching for signs that wouldn't appear in any field guide, listening for sounds that shouldn't exist in rational ecosystems. He maintained the protection protocols. Sage burned regularly, mirrors positioned to show true reflections, juniper ash carried always. And when tourists asked about local legends, about Skinwalker Ranch or stories they'd heard about shapeshifters in the desert, Ryan didn't dismiss them as superstition anymore. Instead, he explained carefully, respectfully, that Navajo traditions held important knowledge about this landscape, and that respecting cultural boundaries was about survival as much as sensitivity. 6 months after arriving in Zion, Ryan was asked to coordinate cultural education programs with Navajo consultants, bridging the gap between Park Service operations and traditional knowledge. The position recognized that some things couldn't be explained through purely scientific frameworks, that indigenous wisdom about landscape and its dangers deserved integration rather than dismissal. Ryan accepted, knowing that his education about Yinald Lushi would continue indefinitely, because the desert held secrets his training hadn't prepared him for, and survival meant acknowledging what he didn't understand while learning from those who'd lived with these mysteries for generations. He still checked mirrors compulsively, still avoided answering phones from unknown numbers after dark, still felt the occasional prickling awareness of being watched by something that left no visible trace. But he'd learned to live with uncertainty, to function despite incomplete understanding, to respect the boundary between what could be explained and what could only be survived. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the desert wind carried sounds that almost formed words, Ryan would stand outside his apartment and speak into the darkness. "I see you. I acknowledge you. But you can't have me." The wind never answered, but it always moved on, carrying whatever listened in the shadows back into the red rock wilderness where some mysteries remained unsolved by design. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened. The spreadsheet showed 17 disappearances in Cades Cove over the past 40 years, and they all happened on the same date. Emily Sorensen stared at her laptop screen in the ranger station office, the overhead fluorescent lights humming their eternal mosquito whine. March 21st, spring equinox, 17 people over 4 decades, hikers, campers, photographers, all vanishing without trace on that specific date in that specific location. The statistical probability was so astronomical it couldn't be coincidence. She'd discovered the pattern 3 days into her new position as law enforcement ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Fresh transfer from Yellowstone, still learning the trails and protocols, still pronouncing Appalachia wrong according to the locals. The veteran rangers treated her with polite distance, not hostile, just waiting to see if she'd last. Most transfers from western parks didn't. Something about the Smokies drove them back west within a year. Too humid, they said. Too claustrophobic. The mountains here pressed close in ways the Rockies never did. Emily had pulled the historical incident reports as part of her orientation. Standard procedure. Familiarize yourself with the area's emergency response patterns. But when she'd started organizing the data chronologically, the pattern emerged like a face in static. 1972. Margaret Hewitt, 34, solo hiker, last seen entering Cades Cove Loop Road. March 21st, 1975, David and Susan Montgomery, honeymooners, tent found intact, belongings undisturbed. March 21st, 1981, Timothy Krause, wildlife photographer, camera found at trailhead, film still inside. March 21st, 17 entries, 17 March 21sts, all within the same 5-square-mile area. The door to the station opened. Ranger Carl Whitmore, 26 years with the park, face like weathered oak, dropped a stack of incident reports on Emily's desk. "New missing person," he said flatly. Connor Burke, 31, software engineer from Charlotte. Didn't return from a day hike yesterday. Family called it in this morning. Emily felt something cold settle in her stomach. Yesterday was March 21st. Carl's expression didn't change. "I know. You know?" Emily turned her laptop toward him, showing the spreadsheet. "You know about the pattern?" Carl looked at the screen for a long moment. Then he looked away. "Everyone who works here long enough knows. We just don't talk about it." "Why not? This should be investigated. Federal involvement, pattern analysis." "It has been. Multiple times. FBI came through in '89 after number 12. State police in Zorro 3 brought in profilers, search dogs, ground-penetrating radar. Found nothing. No bodies, no evidence, no explanation." He tapped the incident report. "Connor Burke is number 18, and we'll search for him, same as all the others, and we won't find him. And next year someone else will vanish on March 21st in Cades Cove." That's insane. You're telling me the Park Service just accepts this? Carl's jaw tightened. I'm telling you that whatever happens in that cove on that date, it's beyond our understanding. And the smart thing, the thing that keeps you safe, is to accept that some places have rules we don't get to know. He left before Emily could respond. She stared at the incident report. Connor Burke had entered the cove at 9 a.m. yesterday via the loop road. His rental car was still parked at the cable mill area. Phone found on the driver's seat, wallet and keys inside the car. He'd taken only a water bottle and camera. Planning a short hike, probably the nature trail or one of the historic building clusters. Emily grabbed her duty belt, Glock 22, radio, first aid kit, bear spray, and headed out. The March morning was cool but humid, that peculiar Appalachian dampness that never quite left. Fog clung to the mountains like breath. The drive to Cades Cove took 20 minutes on the winding mountain roads. The loop itself was an 11-mile one-way circuit through a broad valley surrounded by mountains. Historic area, preserved homesteads from the 1800s, churches, a working grist mill. Popular with tourists, usually. Today, the parking area was nearly empty. Emily pulled in next to Burke's rental, a silver Nissan Altima, Tennessee plates. She documented it with her iPhone, then checked inside. Everything Carl had described. Phone showing multiple missed calls from Sarah, probably the sister who'd filed the report. Wallet containing license, credit cards, $73 cash. Keys in the cup holder. Emily keyed her Motorola radio. Sorensen to dispatch. I'm at Cable Mill beginning search for Burke, starting with the nature trail loop. Copy that, Emily. Be advised weather's moving in. Rain by noon, heavy fog expected. Great. Emily shouldered her pack and started down the trail. The Smokies felt different from Yellowstone's vast openness. Here everything crowded close. Rhododendron thickets, ancient oaks, hemlocks dripping with moisture. The canopy blocked most sunlight even at midday. And the silence was wrong. Not peaceful, oppressive, like the forest was holding its breath. Emily had gone maybe half a mile when she noticed the trees, specifically the way they were marked. Not official trailblazes. Someone had carved symbols into the bark, repeating patterns that looked almost like letters but weren't. Cyrillic maybe? Or something older. The cuts were old, weathered, but still visible. And they appeared on both sides of the trail, as if marking boundaries. She photographed several, making mental notes to research them later. Probably historical vandalism. The cove had been settled by Scots-Irish in the 1800s, but maybe earlier inhabitants, Cherokee certainly, had left markings. The trail forked. Emily checked her GPS, a Garmin Oregon 450, reliable unit she'd used for years. The right path led deeper into the forest toward Gregory Bald. The left curved back toward the loop road. According to the map, both were legitimate trails. She chose right, following what seemed like the more likely route for a day hiker. 20 minutes later, she was lost. Not slightly disoriented. Completely, impossibly lost. The GPS showed her position clearly, still within Cades Cove, roughly half a mile from the loop road, but the trail had vanished. She stood in dense forest with no path in any direction. She'd been following clear trail, marked and maintained, and then it had just stopped, like walking into a wall of trees that shouldn't exist. Emily turned around. The trail she'd just walked should be right there. Nothing. Just rhododendron and mountain laurel, so thick she couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. Her radio crackled. Sorensen, what's your status? She keyed the mic. I've lost the trail. GPS says I'm half a mile northeast of Cable Mill, but there's no path. No markers. Silence. Then Carl's voice, carefully controlled. Emily, what direction are you facing? She checked her compass. North. Turn around, walk south. Don't deviate. Walk exactly south until you hit the loop road. The GPS? Forget the GPS. Trust the compass. Walk south. Something in his tone made her comply. Emily started walking, forcing her way through undergrowth, following the compass needle religiously. The vegetation seemed to resist, branches catching her clothes, roots appearing from nowhere to trip her. But she kept going. After what felt like an hour but was only 15 minutes according to her watch, she broke through onto the loop road. Her truck was visible 100 yards away. She'd somehow circled back. Emily leaned against a tree, breathing hard. This made no sense. The GPS had shown her moving in a straight line northeast. The compass had guided her south. Both couldn't be right. She was reaching for her radio when she saw it. Connor Burke's camera. It sat on a wooden fence post near one of the historic cabins. A Canon EOS Rebel, exactly like the model Burke's sister had described. Emily approached carefully. The camera was dry despite the morning dew, as if it had been placed there recently. She turned it on. The battery was full. She clicked through the photos. The first dozen were standard tourist shots. The cove, mountains, historic buildings. Then the images changed. Photo 47, a trail, clearly marked, heading into forest. Photo 48. The same trail, but the markers were different. Wrong somehow. Photo 49, trees, just trees. But they seemed closer together than possible. Photo 50, the trail was gone, just dense forest. Photo 51, a blur, like Burke had spun around quickly. Photo 52, trees again, but the bark had faces, not carved. Natural patterns in the bark that looked unmistakably like faces. Dozens of them, all watching. Photos 53, 60, increasingly frantic shots. Blurred, poorly framed, like someone running while trying to photograph something. Trees, always trees, pressing closer. Photo 61. Clear image. A figure standing among the trees. Emily zoomed in on the LCD screen. The figure was tall, at least 7 feet, and seemed to be made of bark and moss and twisted branches. But it had a face. Human-ish. Eyes that looked directly at the camera with obvious intelligence. Photo 62 was the last image. Just darkness. Or maybe not darkness, texture. Like the inside of tree bark. Like Burke had been pressed against or into a tree when the photo was taken. Emily's hands were shaking. She ejected the memory card and pocketed it. Then she radioed dispatch. "I found Burke's camera. I'm bringing it in. I need to speak with Carl immediately." Back at the station, Emily plugged the memory card into her laptop. Carl watched over her shoulder as she went through the images. "That's a Leshy," he said quietly when she reached photo 61. "A what?" "Slavic forest spirit, guardian, protector of old-growth forests. The settlers who came here in the 1700s and 1800s, a lot of them were Eastern European. They brought their folklore with them. And they found..." He gestured at the screen. "They found those beliefs weren't just folklore here." Emily stared at him. "You're saying there's an actual, forest monster in Cades Cove?" "I'm saying that valley was sacred to the Cherokee before white settlement. They called it Siahi, Otter Place. But they had other names for it too. Names that translate roughly to where the trees watch or where the forest remembers. The Cherokee didn't live there. Hunted through it, but never settled. Because something older lived there first. And you think this, Leshy? I think whatever it is, it predates human names for it. The Slavic settlers called it Leshy because that was their framework. The Cherokee had their own names. But it's the same thing. Guardian spirit. Territorial. And it doesn't like humans in its forest on certain days. Spring equinox." Carl nodded. "Day of balance. Day when the veil between our world and other places gets thin. Old belief systems all agree on that much." Emily looked at the photo of the figure. "If you knew about this, why didn't you warn Burke?" "We did. Sort of. The cove is closed to overnight camping on March 21st. Has been for 20 years. We can't explain why in the official literature, so we cite maintenance or wildlife management. Most people don't question it." He paused. "But we can't close it completely. It's a public park. We can't legally bar access without cause. And forest spirit takes people on the equinox isn't a cause the federal government recognizes." "So you just let people disappear?" We do everything we can within the rules." Carl's voice was hard. "We post warnings. We station rangers at the entrances on that date. We try to turn people around, but if someone insists on going in, we can't physically stop them." Emily looked at photo 62, the darkness that might be tree bark. "We have to find him. He could still be alive. For about 6 more hours, maybe. It's March 22nd now. After sunset tonight, if he's still in there, he's gone permanently. That's the pattern. People taken on March 21st have until the next sunset. After that..." Carl shrugged helplessly. "We've tried. Every year we try. But the forest doesn't give them back." Emily was already grabbing her gear. "Then we have 6 hours. I'm going in." "Emily, listen to me. I've worked here 26 years. I've seen 12 disappearances. I've lost 3 fellow rangers who went searching after sunset. The forest on that date it's not normal space. GPS doesn't work right. Compasses spin. Trails move. And if you're in there when the sun sets..." "I'm going in," Emily repeated. "You can help me or not." Carl was silent for a long moment. Then he grabbed his own pack. "I'll help. But we follow my rules. We stay together. We trust compasses over GPS. And if I say we're leaving, we leave. No arguments. Deal." They loaded into Emily's truck and drove back to Cades Cove. The morning fog had thickened into proper mist. The mountains were invisible beyond 100 yards. Carl led them to a different trailhead, barely visible, unmarked, almost certainly unofficial. The Cherokee had paths that avoided the active areas, he explained. "This is one of them. It's not on any modern map, but it's the safest way to move through the cove when the forest is awake." "Awake? You'll understand when you feel it." They started hiking. Immediately, Emily felt the difference. The forest had weight here, a presence that pressed against her awareness. The trees seemed to lean inward, watching. The silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, just the sound of their boots on soft earth and their own breathing. The marked trees appeared again, those strange symbols carved into bark. Carl touched one reverently as they passed. "Protection marks," he said. "Cherokee shamans made them. Later, the Eastern European settlers reinforced them. They're supposed to mark safe paths, areas the Guardian has agreed not to defend. Does it work? Sometimes." They walked for an hour, the forest growing denser, darker. Emily's sense of direction was completely scrambled. Her GPS showed them walking in circles, but Carl moved with confidence, checking his compass constantly. Then they heard it. A voice, human, male, shouting for help. "Connor Burke?" Emily called out. "Help! I'm stuck! I can't get out!" The voice came from ahead and to the right. Emily started toward it, but Carl grabbed her arm. "Wait! Listen to where it's coming from!" Emily focused. The voice seemed to move, coming from different directions with each shout. Behind them now, then to the left, then above them. "It's the forest," Carl said quietly. "It's learned to mimic. That's not Burke. Or maybe it is, but it's not him anymore. It's the forest wearing his voice." As if in response, the voice changed, became Emily's voice. "Help me," it called in her exact tone. "Carl, I'm lost. I can't find the trail." Emily felt her skin crawl. Hearing her own voice come from the trees was viscerally wrong. "Ignore it," Carl said. "Keep moving." They pressed on. The voices followed. Burke's, Emily's, other voices she didn't recognize. Men, women, children, all calling for help, all coming from different impossible directions. The fog thickened into something unnatural, green-tinged, luminescent. It moved against the wind, or maybe there was no wind anymore. Maybe they'd passed into somewhere wind didn't exist. Emily checked her watch. 2:47 p.m., less than 4 hours until sunset. They broke into a clearing. Natural or artificial, Emily couldn't tell. The trees formed a perfect circle around open space, maybe 40 feet across. In the center stood a structure. Not a building. More like a cathedral made of living wood. Trees had grown together, their branches interlacing to form walls and arches. Roots emerged from the ground to create steps leading to an opening that might be a door. "I've never seen this before," Carl whispered. "And I've been in this forest for decades. Is that good or bad? I don't know." Inside the clearing, the voices stopped. The oppressive presence of the forest receded slightly. It felt like stepping into a pocket of calm within a storm. Emily approached the structure carefully. As she got closer, she could see more detail. The trees were old, centuries old, maybe older, and they were covered in carvings. Thousands of symbols, overlapping, layer upon layer. Cherokee, Cyrillic, something that looked like Celtic Ogham, and things that predated all written language. "This is a threshold," Carl said. "A boundary place, between our world and wherever the forest takes them. Can we go in?" "I don't think we have a choice." They entered together. The interior was larger than the exterior suggested, impossible geometry that made Emily's head hurt. The walls were living wood, still growing, still breathing. The floor was soft moss that glowed faintly, and in the center, suspended in a cage of roots growing from floor and ceiling, Connor Burke. He was alive, conscious, but changing. His skin had taken on a bark-like texture. His fingers were elongating, becoming twig-like. Moss grew in his hair. When he opened his eyes, they reflected light like an animal's. "Help," he whispered. His voice was layered, human, and something else. "It's turning me into... I can feel it. I'm becoming part of..." A sound behind them. Emily turned. The figure from the photograph stood in the doorway. The Leshy. 8 feet tall, body made of ancient wood and living vine. Antlers or branches, impossible to tell, crowned its head. Its face was almost human, but not quite. Too symmetrical. Too knowing. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere. A sound like wind through leaves shaped into words. "You enter my forest uninvited. You disturb the balance. Every year one is taken as reminder. One is changed as tribute. This is the agreement made when your people first came to these mountains. Blood and respect for permission to pass." "There's no agreement," Emily said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "People don't consent to..." "Their ancestors consented." The Cherokee knew. The first white settlers knew. Each generation forgets, and each generation must be taught again. The Leshy moved closer, not walking, flowing. "This one," it gestured to Connor, "entered during the sacred hours. He belongs to the forest now." Carl stepped forward. "We request mercy. It's not his fault he didn't know. Ignorance is not exception. The forest does not make exceptions. The forest only remembers, and I am the forest's memory." Emily's hand went to her Glock. Useless gesture. What was she going to do, shoot a tree? But the Leshy noticed. "You carry violence, of course, your kind always does. That is why tribute is required, why balance must be maintained. You take and take from the forest. Trees, animals, space. The forest takes one life per year in return. Fair exchange. It's not fair. Then leave the mountains. Return the land. Restore what was destroyed. Until then, the agreement stands." Connor Burke made a sound, half scream, half something else. His transformation was accelerating. Roots were growing from his feet, burrowing into the moss floor. Emily felt helpless rage building. This couldn't be how it ended. There had to be. "Take me instead," she heard herself say. Carl grabbed her arm. "Emily, no, I'm serious. You want tribute? Fine. But let him go. He has family. People who love him. Take me instead." The Leshy tilted its head. "You would trade yourself? You are new to these mountains. The forest has no claim on you yet. Then my choice is truly voluntary. Isn't that more valuable? Someone who chooses to stay rather than someone trapped?" Silence. The Leshy seemed to consider. Or maybe it was consulting with the forest itself. Emily had the sense of vast communication happening beyond her perception. The balance requires sacrifice, it said finally. But the nature of sacrifice matters. Forced tribute and chosen devotion are different flavors. It moved toward Emily. You would stay? Become guardian? Learn the forest's ways and enforce the boundaries from within? If you release Connor Burke, yes. Emily, don't, Carl started. But Emily cut him off. It's my choice. The Leshy extended one branch-like hand. Then be marked, be claimed, be changed. Emily stepped forward and took its hand. The sensation was like lightning through her nervous system. She could suddenly feel the entire forest. Every tree, every root, every blade of grass. The network of life pulsing beneath her awareness. And older things. Spirits. Memories. Consciousnesses that had existed here for millennia. She understood now. The Leshy wasn't a monster. It was a guardian, yes, but also a priest. A keeper of balance. The forest wasn't evil. It was old and wild, and operated by rules humans had forgotten. Rules about respect and reciprocity and the cost of taking without giving. When the sensation faded, Emily looked at her hands. Bark patterns traced her skin like tattoos. Her fingernails had darkened to wood brown. She could feel roots. Not from her body, not yet. But she could sense them beneath the earth, waiting. The change is slow, the Leshy said. You have time. Learn. Understand. When you are ready, you will join us fully. Until then, you walk between, human enough to speak to your kind, forest enough to speak for us. The roots holding Connor released. He collapsed, gasping. The bark texture on his skin was fading, the transformation reversing. Carl rushed to him, helping him stand. Can you walk? Connor nodded weakly. Then we're leaving. Now. Carl looked at Emily. You too. Whatever agreement you made. I'm staying, Emily said. Her voice was calm. It's done. Emily. Carl, someone has to do this. Someone has to stand between the forest and people who don't understand. I'm that person now. Take Connor home. Tell them... She paused. Tell them I'm remaining as liaison. Permanent posting to Cades Cove. It's not technically a lie. Carl's face was anguished, but he nodded. He understood. Someone had to stay. Someone always had to stay. He helped Connor toward the exit. At the threshold, he looked back. Will I see you again? Maybe. On the margins. I'll still be me. Mostly. Just more. They left. Emily watched them go, feeling the forest's presence settling into her bones. The Leshy stood beside her. You chose bravely. The forest honors that. You will be taught. You will learn the old ways. And when others come, as they will, every year, you will stand as warning and protection both. Will it hurt? The full change? Change always carries pain, but also beauty. You will see things no human has seen. Understand languages spoken only in root and wind. You will live long. Centuries, perhaps. Time moves differently here. Emily thought about her life, her career, her apartment back in Montana, her sister in Portland. All that felt distant now. Someone else's life. Someone she'd been before the forest claimed her. When does it happen? The full transformation? When you're ready. When you stop fighting it. When you understand that you're not losing your humanity, you're expanding beyond it. Emily looked at her hands. The bark patterns were spreading slowly up her arms. She could feel the forest's heartbeat matching her own. She was scared, terrified, but also curious. What would it be like to be part of something so old, so vast? The Leshy placed a hand on her shoulder. Its touch was gentle. Come. I will show you the deep forest. The places where stone remembers the first words spoken here. Where water runs with purpose older than names. Where trees hold councils you may now attend. Emily took a last look at the exit. At the human world she was leaving behind. Then she turned and followed the guardian deeper into the living cathedral. The transformation would take time. Weeks, months, maybe years. But it had begun. And somewhere in her changing heart she felt, not peace exactly, but rightness, like a piece finding its place in a pattern too large to comprehend fully. Behind her, the forest closed its boundaries. The clearing vanished from human perception. The trail Carl had followed would be gone by the time he returned with Connor to the loop road. And next year, on March 21st, there would be no disappearance. Because Emily Sorensen would stand at the threshold, warning visitors away, speaking for the forest, explaining, as much as could be explained, that some places demanded respect, not conquest. That balance had a price. She was that price now. And strangely, terrifyingly, she accepted it. The last human thought she had, before the forest's consciousness fully merged with hers, was simple. Some territories choose their guardians. Others make them. Cade's Cove had made her. And she would serve. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened. The last thing Kayla Morrison said over the radio wasn't a scream. It was laughter, wet and wrong, coming from a throat that sounded like it was drowning in soil. Lisa Hoffman had been a ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 6 years, long enough to distinguish between different kinds of distress calls. Fear had a particular pitch, pain, another, confusion, hypothermia, panic. Each created distinct vocal patterns she'd learned to recognize and respond to appropriately. But this sound, crackling through her Motorola GP380 at 11:47 p.m. on October 31, 2003, matched nothing in her experience. Kayla Morrison, what's your status? Lisa kept her voice steady despite the cold pressure building in her chest. Behind her, through the ranger station's window, fog pressed against the glass like something alive, the kind of dense Appalachian mist that could reduce visibility to arm's length within minutes. The laughter continued for another 5 seconds, then cut to wet breathing. Ranger Hoffman. Kayla's voice sounded strained, as if speaking required forcing air through something thick. I think I found where the old settlers are buried, the ones that aren't on the maps. Lisa pulled up the search grid on her computer. Kayla Morrison, 29 years old, solo hiker from Knoxville, had been reported overdue 12 hours ago when she failed to check in at Klingman's Dome shelter. Her last known position placed her near the Forney Creek Trail, an area that saw little traffic this late in October. The park had hundreds of old burial sites, pioneer families, Cherokee settlements predating forced removal, even earlier graves from people whose names had been lost to time and forest growth. Kayla, I need you to describe your exact location. Any landmarks? There's a clearing. Maybe 30 graves, all marked with stones. No names, just symbols. The transmission broke into static. When Kayla's voice returned, it had changed. Lower, slower. They're not empty, Ranger Hoffman. I can hear them under the ground. Scratching. Lisa's hand moved automatically to her emergency contact list, but she hesitated. Protocol said to call for backup to coordinate a night rescue with proper support. But protocol also assumed rational explanations. Injury, disorientation, hypothermia, induced confusion. Something in Kayla's voice suggested a different category of emergency, one that Lisa's official training hadn't covered but her family history had prepared her for. Her grandmother had been Romanian, had come to Tennessee in 1952, carrying stories that the family dismissed as old-world superstition. Stories about the Strigoi, the undead who returned when burial rites were performed incorrectly, or when violent death left debts unpaid. Stories about how the Appalachians reminded her of the Carpathians, how mountains held memories, how certain places thinned the boundary between the living and what came after. Kayla, I need you to move away from that location, now. Don't stop to gather equipment, just walk back the way you came. I can't. Kayla's voice had dropped to a whisper. Something's coming out, The earth is moving. I can see, oh God, I can see hands. The transmission cut completely. Lisa was moving before conscious thought caught up. She grabbed her pack, already loaded with standard search equipment, and added items protocol didn't cover. Salt from the break room, a bottle of whiskey, matches, and a silver compass her grandmother had given her with instructions Lisa had thought were folklore until this moment. Instructions about how the dead in mountain graves didn't always stay buried, especially when someone disturbed their rest on Samhain, the night when barriers between worlds grew thin. She left a note for the morning shift. Responding to Morrison emergency, Forney Creek area, will radio at dawn. Didn't mention the rest because writing it down would force her to acknowledge how completely insane it sounded. The fog outside was impenetrable. Lisa's truck headlights penetrated maybe 20 feet before light diffused into gray nothing. She drove by memory and GPS, a Garmin E-Trex Summit that was top of the line for 2003 but primitive by future standards, navigating switchbacks where one wrong turn meant a 100-foot drop into darkness. Her phone rang. Not the radio. Her personal Nokia 3310. She almost didn't answer, thinking it was Derek, her ex-husband, calling to argue about next week's custody schedule for their 8-year-old son, Mason. But the number on the dim green screen wasn't Derek's. Hello? Mommy. Mason's voice, small and scared. Are you coming home? Lisa's heart clenched. Baby, why are you calling? You're supposed to be with your dad tonight. He's not here. He dropped me off, but you weren't home, so I'm waiting. It's dark and the fog is really thick and I keep hearing noises outside. Lisa's hands tightened on the wheel. Derek had done this before, changed plans without telling her, assuming she'd be home because where else would a responsible parent be at midnight on Halloween? Never mind that she'd told him 2 days ago about pulling a night shift. Mason, listen carefully. Lock all the doors. Turn on every light in the house. I'm coming home right now, but Mommy, the lady outside says she knows you. She says she has a message from Grandma. Lisa's blood turned to ice water. Her grandmother had died 3 years ago, and Mason had never met her. She'd passed when he was 5, during a period when Lisa's mother had kept the family at distance, uncomfortable with the old woman's stories and stranger, uncomfortable with how Lisa had started believing them after too many years in these mountains. What lady? Mason? Where is she? At the back door. She's really pale and her clothes are old and dirty like she's been digging. She keeps knocking and saying Grandma sent her to... The line went dead. Lisa's foot slammed the accelerator. The truck fishtailed on the narrow mountain road, tires screaming protest. She had 2 emergencies now. Kayla Morrison somewhere in the forest encountering something that made people laugh with lungs full of earth, and her son alone in their house with something that claimed to have messages from the dead. She couldn't be in both places, couldn't save everyone. The choice tore at her with physical pain: abandon a hiker in genuine distress, or leave her child alone with whatever was knocking at their door. Lisa grabbed her radio. Hoffman to dispatch. I have a family emergency. Need immediate backup at Forney Creek Trail for Morrison rescue. Static answered. She tried her cell phone. No signal, which was normal this deep in the park but felt malicious now, as if the mountain itself was conspiring to isolate her. The road forked. Left toward town and Mason. Right toward the Forney Creek trailhead and Kayla. Lisa sat at the intersection while the fog pressed in and seconds ticked past, each one a small betrayal of someone who needed her. Her grandmother's voice echoed from memory. The Strigoi hunt on Samhain because the barriers are thin. They rise from graves that were not properly blessed, from bodies that died with business unfinished. They are hungry for life they no longer have. But they are bound by old rules. They cannot enter a home uninvited. They cannot cross lines of salt. They cannot pursue the innocent, only those who have disturbed their rest or broken sacred laws. Mason was innocent. Whatever was at their door couldn't enter without invitation, but an 8-year-old boy, scared and alone, might not understand that inviting the pale lady inside was exactly what he shouldn't do. Kayla had disturbed a burial ground, had walked into an unmarked cemetery on the night when the dead walked easiest, If what Lisa suspected was true, Kayla was already beyond saving. Already infected with the curse of the Strigoi, the undead state that began with hearing the scratching beneath graves and ended with clawing one's own way out of earth, Lisa turned left. Toward home. Toward Mason. The 15-minute drive took 30 through fog that seemed actively malevolent. Twice, Lisa nearly drove off the road when the mist shaped itself into figures standing at the shoulder. Human shapes that turned to watch her pass, their eyes reflecting headlights like animal eyes shouldn't reflect, too bright and too red. Her house appeared suddenly, materialized from fog with all its lights blazing as instructed. Lisa parked and ran to the front door, key already in hand. Locked. Good. She burst inside. Mason! Her son appeared at the top of the stairs, face pale but unharmed. Lisa took the steps 3 at a time and pulled him into a hug that made him squeak in protest. Did you invite her in? The lady at the door, did you let her inside? No. You always said never open doors for strangers, but Mommy, she's still out there. She won't leave. She just keeps knocking and saying Grandma's name, and Mason's voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes when I look at the window, there's more than one person. There's lots of them. All pale and dirty. Lisa carried Mason downstairs and looked through the kitchen window. The back porch light illuminated fog and nothing else. But when she stared long enough, shapes resolved from the gray. Human figures standing motionless in their yard, arranged in a semicircle around the house. 7 of them. No. 9. More appearing as her eyes adjusted, emerging from mist like photographs developing in chemical solution. They were dressed in clothes from different eras, homespun fabric from the 1800s, work clothes from the Depression, modern hiking gear. All of them shared the same unnatural pallor, the same earth-stained skin, the same 2 bright eyes that didn't blink in the porch light's glare. One stood closer than the others, female, wearing a dress that might have been white before grave soil turned it gray. Her face was familiar. Lisa had seen it in old photographs her grandmother kept, pictures of relatives who died in Romania before the family emigrated. The woman raised one hand and knocked on the window. Not hard, not threatening, just persistent. 3 slow knocks. Then her mouth moved, shaping words Lisa couldn't hear through glass but could read on lips that hadn't moved properly in decades. Let us in, Elena. Elena had been her grandmother's name. Lisa pulled Mason away from the window and carried him to the living room, set him on the couch. Stay here, don't move, don't look at the windows. She retrieved the salt from her truck and poured lines across every threshold, front door, back door, windows on the ground floor. Old rules, her grandmother had said. The dead could not cross salt freely given and properly blessed. Lisa didn't know any formal blessings, but she whispered her grandmother's name as she poured, adding, "Please protect us," in Romanian, a language she barely remembered from childhood. The knocking stopped. Lisa risked a glance through the window. The figures remained in their semicircle, but they'd stepped back from the house, retreated to the edge of the property line where they stood watching with patient hunger. Not gone, just waiting. Her radio crackled. Lisa nearly jumped. She grabbed it, expecting dispatch, hoping for backup. Instead, Kayla Morrison's voice emerged through static. Ranger Hoffman. I understand now. I disturbed them, walked through their resting place without respect, without permission. Now they want me to join them. They've been teaching me what it means to be hungry when you have no stomach, to be cold when you have no blood to warm. It's not so bad. Not after the first hour of screaming. After that, it's almost peaceful. Kayla, where are you? Lisa kept her voice low, aware of Mason listening from the couch. Still at the burial ground, but I'm under it now. They pulled me down so gently, like they were tucking me in. The soil is softer than you'd think from the inside. Warm, dark. I can feel them all around me, the others who came before. We're all waiting together, waiting for Samhain to end, for the barriers to thin completely, for permission to rise. Permission from who? From whoever disturbed us, from whoever broke the sacred ground. That's the rule. The Strigoi can only rise when invited by the living, when someone violates their rest. I invited them by walking through without asking. Now they can rise. All of them. Not just from this grave. From all the forgotten graves in these mountains. There are hundreds, Ranger Hoffman. Maybe thousands. People buried without proper rites in unconsecrated ground. In places the forest has reclaimed. We're all waking up. Lisa's mind raced through her grandmother's stories, trying to remember what stopped the Strigoi once they rose. Salt slowed them. Running water confused them. Silver burned them. But those were defensive measures, ways to delay the inevitable. To actually stop them required. The memory hit her like cold water. To stop the Strigoi permanently, you had to find the grave they rose from and complete what their original burial failed to provide. Proper rites, sacred words, blessing the ground they'd left cursed by their dying. Kayla, I need the exact location of that burial ground. GPS coordinates if you can. Laughter again, that wet, drowning sound. Why? So you can come bless us back into staying dead? Too late, Ranger. The sun will rise in 7 hours. We have until dawn to do what the hungry dead do. After that, we return to soil, but we'll return satisfied. What do you want? The same thing all hungry things want, to consume, to take the life we don't have anymore. The old rules say we can only feed on those who disturbed our rest or their bloodline. Kayla Morrison disturbed us. So Kayla Morrison becomes us, but you know what's interesting? The voice on the radio wasn't quite Kayla anymore. It had layers now. Multiple throats speaking in imperfect unison. Your grandmother disturbed graves too. Long ago before she left Romania. She opened a tomb she shouldn't have opened. She took something that belonged to the dead. She thought moving to America would let her escape the consequences. But the Strigoi are patient. We can wait generations. We can follow bloodlines across oceans. And tonight, when the barriers are thinnest, we've come to collect what she owed. The figures outside the house moved closer, not crossing the salt lines, but testing them, toes touching the threshold and recoiling from whatever force the barrier created. Mason whispered from the couch, "Mommy, what's happening?" Lisa's hand moved to her phone. One emergency contact left to try. She dialed her mother's number, praying for an answer. 3 rings. 4. Voicemail. She tried again. This time her mother answered, voice thick with sleep. "Lisa, it's midnight. What did Grandma take from Romania? What did she steal from the dead?" Silence stretched long enough that Lisa thought the connection had dropped. Finally, "How do you know about that?" "Because they're here. The Strigoi. They're at my house and they want payment." "What did she take?" Her mother's voice shook. "A phylactery. A container holding something that should have stayed buried with a Romanian nobleman who died in 1847. He was Strigoi. Had been for years before they finally caught and killed him properly. They buried him with his personal effects in blessed ground, sealed with prayers. Your grandmother was young, stupid, thought the phylactery was valuable. She opened the tomb and took it. The family had to flee Romania 3 months later when people from his bloodline started dying. We came to America. She hid the phylactery, never spoke of it. I thought the danger died with her. Where is it, the phylactery? Where did she hide it? I don't know. She said she'd buried it somewhere safe, somewhere the Strigoi could never find it. Somewhere in the mountains, she said. In a place of power that would keep it contained. Lisa looked out the window. The figures had multiplied, dozens now, arranged in concentric circles around her property, all of them watching with eyes that reflected light like predators' eyes, patient and hungry and absolutely certain of their eventual victory. The radio crackled again. "We can smell it." The voice that had been Kayla Morrison was completely gone now, replaced by something older, speaking English with a thick Romanian accent Lisa's grandmother had worked years to lose. "The phylactery is near. Your grandmother buried it in these mountains. We will find it. And when we do, the debt she owed will be paid in full. Your blood and your son's blood and every drop of life in your family line." Lisa pulled Mason close, Her mind worked through the geometry of the problem. The Strigoi wanted the phylactery. Her grandmother had hidden it in the mountains. The mountains meant the park, nearly 522,000 acres of wilderness with thousands of burial sites, forgotten graves, places of power, both Native American and Christian, and older things that predated both. But her grandmother had been specific about location, always, had marked important places, created maps for family members even when the family dismissed her as superstitious. Lisa remembered boxes in her mother's attic, papers and photographs her grandmother had saved. "I need to go to my mother's house," Lisa said into the phone. "I need Grandma's papers, everything she saved about the mountains." "Lisa, it's midnight, and if what you're saying is true..." "If what I'm saying is true, we're all dead by dawn unless I find that phylactery and use it to bargain with them. Mason needs to stay with you. Keep him inside. Pour salt across every door and window. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Lisa gathered Mason's coat and shoes, avoiding the windows where the dead watched. She carried him to the truck, moving fast, knowing the Strigoi couldn't cross her threshold, but uncertain what they could do once she left the salt protection. The figures parted as she pulled out of the driveway. Let her pass. They had no reason to stop her. She was doing exactly what they wanted, leading them to the phylactery, to the object that would complete the curse and let them feed on her bloodline with the old law's blessing. Lisa dropped Mason at her mother's house with instructions that made her mother's face go pale. Then she drove to the ranger station, mind working through decades of her grandmother's stories, trying to remember every detail about places of power in these mountains. The station's archives held decades of documentation. Lisa pulled file after file, spreading them across her desk. Old maps showing pioneer settlements, Cherokee sacred sites, burial grounds both marked and unmarked. She cross-referenced them with her grandmother's papers. Letters, diary entries in Romanian that Lisa had to puzzle through with a dictionary. Photographs of mountain locations marked with symbols Lisa now recognized as protective wards. Pattern emerged slowly. Her grandmother had visited certain locations repeatedly in her first years in Tennessee, had photographed them from multiple angles, had written notes about similarities to homeland, and good places for remembering, and once, more explicitly, places where the dead sleep deep. One location appeared more than others. A ridge near Klingman's Dome, not far from where Kayla Morrison had made her last transmission. A place where 3 creeks converged, where Cherokee, European settlers, and earlier peoples had all buried their dead. A place with so many graves layered over centuries that the earth itself was more bone than soil. Lisa's grandmother had written about it in 1952, shortly after arriving. Found the place today, strong enough to hold what I brought from home. Sacred to many peoples, many deaths. The dead guard the dead here. It will keep the phylactery safe until I can find proper way to destroy it. Until then it sleeps under graves of those who died clean, who would not welcome the Strigoi. They will keep it contained. Coordinates followed, written in margin, 35.5628 to Green N, 83.4983 W. Lisa entered them into her GPS. The location was 12 miles into the backcountry, accessible only by trail, requiring 3 hours of hiking under normal conditions. In darkness, in fog, with the dead hunting her? She had 7 hours until dawn. If her grandmother was right, the Strigoi would return to their graves at sunrise, forced back by whatever laws governed the undead. 7 hours to hike 12 miles, find a buried phylactery in a ridge full of graves, and figure out what to do with it. Lisa loaded her pack with everything she might need. Flashlights with extra batteries, her GPS unit, rope, a folding shovel, food and water, the silver compass, matches, the whiskey, more salt, her radio and phone for communication, a laminated park map showing the trail to the coordinates. She drove to the Forney Creek trailhead. The parking area was empty except for one vehicle, a Honda Civic with Knoxville plates registered to Kayla Morrison. Lisa photographed it, documenting everything by habit even though no official report would ever include what she was about to do. The trail began where pavement ended. Lisa's flashlight cut a tunnel through darkness and fog, illuminating 10 feet ahead before light dissolved into gray nothing. She moved fast, navigating by GPS, using the trail when it matched her bearing and cutting cross-country when it didn't. The forest was wrong. Too silent. No animal sounds, no wind through branches, just the crunch of her boots on leaves and her own measured breathing. The fog moved strangely, flowing uphill and pooling in valleys, behaving like liquid more than vapor. 2 miles in, Lisa saw the first grave. Just a depression in earth, marked by a stone without inscription. Then another. And another. The trail passed through an old cemetery, dozens of graves from the 1800s, most markers weathered, illegible, or fallen into soil. Lisa didn't slow down, didn't look too closely at the depressions that seemed freshly disturbed, at earth that looked like it had been pushed up from beneath. 5 miles. Her GPS showed her making good time despite conditions. 3 more hours of darkness left. She'd reach the coordinates with time to spare. The laughter started around mile 7, not from her radio, from the forest itself. Multiple voices, wet and wrong, echoing from all directions. Lisa recognized Kayla Morrison's contribution to the chorus, but there were others, dozens of others. The sound of people who'd drowned in earth, whose lungs held soil instead of air, but who laughed anyway because the alternative was madness. Lisa ran. Her pack bounced against her back, flashlight beam jerking wildly. The GPS screen showed her position creeping toward the coordinates. 35.556 to a yacht again. 83.4983 to W. 1 mile, half mile, 300 yards. The trail opened into a clearing at the top of a ridge. 3 creeks met here, their water flowing in defiance of gravity, running uphill toward the convergence point. In the center stood a massive oak tree, older than the park itself, roots spreading across ground that rose and fell in patterns suggesting countless graves beneath. Lisa's grandmother had been right. This place held power. Could feel it in the air, a pressure that made her ears pop and her skin prickle. Sacred to many peoples, layered with death from centuries of burial. The kind of place where boundaries between worlds grew thin even when it wasn't Samhain. She pulled out the folding shovel and began to dig at the oak's base, where her grandmother's notes said the phylactery was buried. Soil came up easily, already loose as if recently disturbed. 3 feet down, her shovel struck metal. Lisa cleared the soil carefully. A metal box, maybe 8 inches square, unmarked but heavy. She lifted it free and brushed dirt from the lid. No lock, just a simple clasp. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a small wooden container carved with symbols Lisa recognized from her grandmother's papers. Romanian words of protection, Christian crosses, older symbols that predated Christianity. She opened the phylactery. Inside was a ring, silver set with a dark stone, inscribed with words in a language Lisa didn't know. It felt cold even through her gloves, cold in a way that suggested absence rather than temperature. Cold like the voices on her radio, cold like the pale figures that had stood outside her house. "You found it." The voice came from behind her. Lisa spun. The woman in the earth-stained white dress stood at the clearing's edge. Up close, the family resemblance was unmistakable. This was the relative from her grandmother's photographs, the cousin who died in Romania in 1949. Behind her, more figures emerged from fog. Dozens, hundreds, all the dead from all the graves in these mountains, risen on this night when barriers fell and old debts came due. Kayla Morrison was among them, still recognizable despite the soil caked in her hair and the unnatural pallor of her skin. She moved with the stuttering gait of someone still learning to animate a body that had stopped obeying normal commands. "Give us the phylactery," the woman in white said. "It contains what was stolen, what your grandmother took from our master's grave, his ring of binding which gave him power over death itself. With it returned, his curse can be completed, your family's debt paid, your bloodline consumed, all clean and proper according to the old laws." Lisa's hand closed around the ring, cold burned through her glove. "And if I destroy it instead?" "You can't. It's bound by magic older than your god. To destroy it would require undoing the bindings, which requires knowledge you don't have. Give it to us or we take it from you." Either way, your family pays. Lisa's mind raced. Her grandmother had stolen this ring, had brought the curse to America, had hidden it here where the dead would guard it. But she hadn't destroyed it because she couldn't. The binding was too strong, the magic too old. So she'd done the next best thing, hidden it in a place of power where other deaths would contain its influence. Unless someone disturbed those graves, unless someone broke the containment on Samhain, unless the barriers fell and the dead rose and the phylactery was exposed. Kayla Morrison walked through this cemetery. Lisa spoke clearly, trying to buy time to think. That's what started this. She disturbed your rest. She gave us permission to rise. But we've been waiting decades for this night. Your grandmother knew we would come eventually. Knew that on Samhain, when the barriers fell, we would search for what she stole. Kayla was simply convenient, a living person who disturbed sacred ground at the exact right time. We've been patient. We can wait decades more if needed. But tonight the dead is due. Lisa looked at the ring in her palm, at the figures surrounding the clearing, at Kayla Morrison standing with the dead, already more gone than present, at the GPS in her other hand showing 4:47 a.m. Less than 2 hours until dawn. Her grandmother's voice echoed in memory. The Strigoi are bound by laws. They can only take what is owed, only feed on bloodlines that created debt. But they are also literal. They follow exact words of curses, exact terms of payment. Lisa took a breath. My grandmother stole this ring from a tomb in Romania. That created a debt. The debt is owed by her bloodline. Me, my mother, my son. But the debt is for theft, not murder. The old laws are specific. You can only take blood if blood was taken first. But my grandmother didn't kill anyone. She stole an object. The figures went still, listening. The payment for theft is return of what was stolen. That's the law. You can't add interest, can't expand punishment beyond the original crime. My grandmother took the ring. I'm returning it. Lisa held up the phylactery. But I'm returning it on my terms. You get the ring back, but it stays here in this sacred ground where it's been for 50 years. Buried in soil blessed by multiple faiths, guarded by the clean dead. You can have it, but you have to leave it here. That satisfies the debt without feeding you our blood. The woman in white smiled, not a kind expression. Clever, but we decide what satisfies debt. No, the old laws decide, and the old laws are specific. Return of stolen property satisfies debt of theft. Unless you want to argue that the curse your master placed wasn't about the theft at all, was just about murder. In which case the curse was invalid from the start because my grandmother stole, didn't kill. Either way, you don't get my blood or my son's blood or anyone's blood. You get the ring back. That's the law. Silence stretched. The dead looked at each other with eyes that reflected Lisa's flashlight. They weren't alive enough to fear, but they were bound enough by old laws to hesitate when those laws were invoked correctly. Finally, the woman in white spoke. Return is acceptable, but you must perform the return properly. Place the ring in the phylactery. Bury it at the tree's base. Speak the words of consecration your grandmother should have spoken. Then the debt is paid. Lisa didn't trust this. Couldn't trust anything the dead said on the night when they walked, but dawn was 90 minutes away and she had no other options. She placed the ring carefully back in the wooden container, closed it, wrapped it in cloth, and placed it in the metal box. Then she dug a deeper hole at the oak's base, placed the box inside, and began covering it with soil. As she worked, she spoke the only Romanian blessing she remembered from her grandmother. Dumnezeu să te odihnească în pace, să rămâi în pământ binecuvântat, să nu te ridici până când vine timpul potrivit. God rest you in peace. May you remain in blessed earth. May you not rise until the proper time comes. The soil over the box grew warm. Lisa felt it through her gloves, not burning, but warm like living skin. The tree's roots shifted, growing over the buried phylactery, binding it to earth with organic chains stronger than any human-made lock. The dead watched. As the last soil fell into place and the roots completed their seal, the figures began to fade, not all at once but gradually, like fog dispersing in sunlight. Kayla Morrison looked at Lisa one final time with eyes that held both gratitude and sorrow, already forgetting what it meant to be alive, then dissolved into mist. The woman in white lasted longest. She stood at the clearing's edge, becoming more transparent with each passing second. Before she vanished completely, she spoke. "The debt is paid. The ring is returned. We are satisfied, but know this, Elena's granddaughter. The ring remains here because we allow it. If anyone disturbs this ground again, if anyone tries to take what you've buried, the debt reopens. Your bloodline has purchased peace for now. Maintain it." Then she was gone. Lisa stood alone in the clearing as the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky. The fog began to lift. The forest's normal sounds returned. Birds, wind, the natural music of a mountain morning. The creeks flowed downhill again, obeying gravity. The weight of supernatural presence lifted like pressure released. Lisa hiked back to the trailhead as sunrise painted the mountains gold. She retrieved her truck, drove to her mother's house, and held Mason tight enough to make him complain. Explain nothing except that everything was okay now. The emergency was over. They were safe. She filed a report about Kayla Morrison, lost in backcountry, presumed dead due to exposure and terrain. Search teams would look, would find nothing, would eventually close the case. Happened every year in these mountains. People walked into wilderness and simply vanished, swallowed by forest that remembered when it was younger and wilder, and full of things that didn't distinguish between life and death. Lisa kept her grandmother's papers, added her own notes, created a file she'd pass to Mason someday when he was old enough to understand, along with instructions. The oak tree clearing at coordinates 35.5628°RN, 83.4983°RW is sacred ground. Never disturb it. Never allow anyone to dig there. Never remove what's buried. The debt is paid but not forgiven. The dead are patient. They remember. And some nights when the fog rolled thick through Appalachian valleys and the moon hung dark, Lisa would stand at her window and see shapes at the edge of her property, watching, making sure she remembered, making sure the bloodline kept its promise. The Strigoi were patient. They could wait generations, and they always collected their debts. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened.